imagine modem sounds. It's hot up here. So. All right. Some of you may recognize what this looks like, even without the demo scene music playing. Who here is actually called a bulletin board system, a BBS? Okay, wow, you roll. Yeah, bulletin boards, BBSs, bulletin board systems, started back in the 1970s. And they enjoyed a long life, more or less, but it started back in the 70s, really took off once microcomputers, once personal computers were available and easily purchased for a reasonable amount. Now back in the 70s, nerds didn't have a lot of outlets for their nerddom. I mean, you pretty much had Dungeons and Dragons. The downside to that is that you probably actually have to have friends to play with and possibly leave your house. So personal computers solved that problem. Yeah, I can just taste the 70s in this photo. Anyway, speaking of the 70s, why would you want to leave your house with beautiful interior design like this, shag carpeting and all that sort of thing? Thankfully, the 70s ended pretty quickly, within about 10 years. And that brought on the 1980s. The 1980s was the pinnacle of human civilization. We had the greatest game consoles back in the 80s, the best home entertainment stuff. Best cars, definitely. Best movies. Best music. Imagine your own Rickroll since the audio doesn't want to happen. We had the best music, and the Berlin Wall at the end of the 80s actually fell, ending what I think we're going to have to start calling the First Cold War. Unfortunately, the 80s were soon followed by the 90s, which sucked. The good thing is we live in the Midwest, so these decades usually arrive a little bit delayed to us. We don't necessarily get them in January. We might get them around May or something because of the winter. So a lot of us were still using 70s or 80s computers up into the 90s because we may not have the budget for the cool 486s and things like that. Computers got a lot faster in the 90s. They were more powerful, they were uglier and boring because they were beige and so on. There were services like American Online, CompuServe, Prodigy. These online services that have been around for years started offering internet access, which ruined the internet for everyone. I hate you, Tom Hanks. Thankfully, Sir Tim Berners-Lee came to our rescue. Around 1990, he got bored with particle physics at CERN. Don't worry about that, it's an HP. Anyway, he got bored with particle physics and decided to write some software and invented the World Wide Web, which led to innovations such as these. Anyway, World Wide Web came around, he invented it around 1990, starts taking off around 1994. But BBSs are still around. Bulletin board systems that people dial into with an old-fashioned computer are still exciting and still in use. Now, this is a modem. For those of you who didn't recognize the sound or didn't dial BBS when you were kids or whatever, modem was this device that either sits inside or outside your computer. There are no other options. And it allows you to dial another computer over a phone line so you can make a connection. It turns ones and zeros into tones, squeals on the phone line. This is a chart that I stole that tries to explain how a bulletin board system works. Basically, you're over here, your computer has a modem on it, connects to a phone line, dials another modem connected to a bulletin board system, a BBS. That BBS has a sysop, or a system operator behind it. That's the person who runs it, the system administrator. Sometimes they can watch what you're doing, which is creepy, and like at 2 in the morning they can just break in and start talking with you. So that was the world we were living in. It had a lot of fringe benefits, or as some people say, French benefits. One of them was the art that came with it. Beautiful, beautiful 16-color ANSI art like this. Your options are kind of limited back then. You've got like 256 characters to choose from, 16 colors, but people got creative with it. Especially people that were dealing in pirated software. Not only were they competing about getting the latest release as quick as possible, they were also making beautiful art to go with it. And our culture is enriched for it. So these bulletin board systems, they had wholesome uses. You could look at this beautiful ANSI art. There was chat, so you could talk to people online. There was email. It's all limited to that bulletin board you call, asterisk, unless you're on some network somewhere. You can download files, so you can go out and get the latest shareware, because remember, the web is not necessarily a thing yet. And you can play door games, so you can go out, those Dungeons and Dragons ripoffs, you can go play against your friends without leaving your home. Of course, a lot of them also have porn. Because that is what has driven all of our technology, unfortunately, for years and years. Or maybe fortunately, I don't know, it sells things. Except it looked like this, very grainy, it's Bill Gates, and it took a long time to load. Very frustrating, I imagine. So I've heard. But then there's underground bulletin board systems. Back then, there were these wholesome bulletin boards, and then there's also the ones that cater to the HBAVC crowd. Hacking, I think you know what that is, you're here. Phreaking, if you don't know what that is, that's like hacking on phone lines back when we had real phones. Anarchy, which this is supposed to be the theme of this thing, right? But there's a lot of rules. They made up their own terrible Latin plural for virus. They called it viri or weirdy. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's not right. Anyway, viruses. Carding, which means credit cards. It means credit card fraud, which is fun. And then the final C is for cracking, or I used to pronounce it in my head as whereas, but I guess it's probably wares. Anyway, pirated software. Lots of fun. So now that we've gotten into the legal stuff, I should probably do the disclaimer. These are my opinions. They don't reflect my employer or anyone else, not Colonel Khan, for God's sake. Yeah. I also want to alert you to the Nebraska statute of limitations. 3 years for felonies, 18 months for most misdemeanors, 4 years for civil tort. Also, because we're talking about computers, the federal statute of limitations, so about 2 years to 5 years. And anything that I talk about here, I've already copped to, no pun intended, at an interview for the place where I work. So this is me. My name is Tony Kava. My website, if you want to contact me with links to LinkedIn and stuff like that, is forensic.coffee. I'll have contact at the end if you really care. The way I explain my job is that I am a simple country digital forensics examiner. I'm a hacker and I carry a badge. And I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. This is my resume slide, my CV. I'll allow you to peruse it. I did work for a telco, but I don't know if I'm allowed to mention their name, so I've redacted it up there. I worked in county IT for almost 15 years in our county's IT department. Then I switched over to our sheriff's office full time. I've been doing digital forensic stuff for about 12 years, or going on 13 now. And there's law enforcement well represented here because you've got me, and then you've got somebody from the FBI, and you know the FBI is always keeping up to date on technology. Yeah, the good thing is that all the stuff I'm talking about happened like 30 years ago, so I don't feel like, I hope I don't go away in cuffs today or whatever, we'll see. And it's not that bad. I mean, as a stupid kid, just like everyone here. But I assume as a stupid kid. I hope I'm still stupid now. Anyway, back in the 80s and 90s, Omaha, the Omaha metro area 402 and 712, so the Gospels, had an active hacker scene, and there were a lot of things going on. There were these bulletin boards. A lot of bulletin boards had this kind of legitimate front to them where they offered the normal stuff, chat and all that sort of thing, but some of them had more features. Some of them were run by criminal masterminds. That's a good slide. You got a picture of that slide? I don't know if I have rights to that slide. Some of them were by criminal masterminds, and so if you dialed into their bulletin board system, you would get your normal menu and has your games and stuff for you to play, and sometimes there would be hidden options. There would be a hidden game that nobody can see. If you know the code, you can get into it. Or maybe there's some like up, down, left, right kind of action you can do, and you can get into a hidden part of the bulletin board system. That's where you get to the real bulletin board system. That's where you get to the underground one, under the overt. Anyone ever call one of these back in the day? Okay. Anyone run silent screams back in the day? Statute of limitations is up. Anyway, so yeah, that's where the underground one is with all the fun stuff. This stuff. I really wish my demo scene music was going, but yeah, like I said, these groups that release pirated software, they brought this art to a new level. You had the ANSI art originally, and then once we got VGA monitors and stuff like that, you had these beautiful graphic intros. Commodore 64 had this gorgeous side, this East German groups that I had stuff from. Anyway, music, this kind of music, chiptune stuff, awesome. All comes out of the pirated software, so good stuff came out of it. Downside to people online, back on bulletin boards and on the internet, is some of them have egos. I don't know if you've run into this yet, but some of them have egos. Some of them have terrible computers, and they can get into fights over who knows what. It could be anything. Sure, it's inaccurate that way. But They get into fights, and when you fight somebody online, when you're a nerd and you fight somebody online, I think it was von Clausewitz who said that online flame wars are diplomacy by other means or something like that. Anyway, they go to their computer, sit in their mom's basement, and they go back and attack whoever attacked them. The downside of this tit for tat kind of trade-off is that sometimes they hurt the family. Sometimes they go too far, and that happened to me. This is where we make an offering to the demo gods. If you're a believer, Zeus, help me. We're going to see if this works. So we got demos going. Instead of an offering to the demo gods, I'm going to make an offering to you. Who wants a floppy disk? Who wants a mess on the stage, too? All right. Who wants a floppy disk?
Floppy reader.
All right. Oh, should have been faster. All right. It's not a real floppy disk. That could hurt it. We have OSHA. Anyway, this is the real deal, though, and it's write protected. So I'm going to show you something called VCL. It's one of those things that you can download from one of those underground bulletin boards.
Those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.
Okay. Some of you will remember that game. So, some of you will remember that I screwed up. I actually need VirtualBox for this. So what's going to happen here, back in the good old days, or bad old days, I ran DOS 3.31 on a compact computer that wasn't my own. And let's see. All right, it's really small. I'm sorry if we can see that. Hang on one second. Remember that demo gods thing? Oh no. Okay, so the problem is I don't have a right control, and I remapped the escape, and I think I forgot what I remapped. I'm getting little glimpses like it's going to work, and then it doesn't. And that's what the computer does. Should have made a better offering, that's all I can say. Okay, so that's where we lost the slides. We're going to reboot. We're going to skip that demo. Basically, what I was going to show you is DOS 3.31, old days. There was this tool called Virus Creation Lab. You can go download it from your favorite underground bulletin board system. And VCL will let you create a virus. Like if you're a script kiddie, you don't know how to write code, you didn't have to. You went through a menu system there, and in the menu system, you would just say, I want this virus to print a certain string, say something like, well, the virus I got is called the Richard Simmons virus. So it said, 1, 2, 3, let's trim that fat. And then it would immediately delete my file allocation table, or fat. And unfortunately, that happened to me. So we had one of these VBS flame wars. We had bulletin board systems, and kids from each one were attacking each other, and somebody uploaded that, said it was something cool. I downloaded it, and sure enough, got infected. Good thing was it wasn't my computer. It belonged to my mom's company. And I lost the file allocation table, which is something I know how to recover from today, but back then I did not. So the Richard Simmons virus got me. And I was going to show you how, but now everything is locked up. So does anyone know on an HP Elite book how to force a power off?
15-pound hammer.
Do we have a backup laptop? I do have PDF slides on a flash drive here. Thanks. So, believe it or not, I did test this extensively before we got here. Yeah, if you have a laptop, I've got slides. She trusts me. Okay, you got one? So, no, I think they've got this one here already on. I got you. So believe it or not, I do give these talks regularly. And for that reason, I have like 3 levels of backups with me. So we're going to go to level 1, which is a PDF on a flash drive. We still have all the slides. You're not going to get the demos. I do have recorded demos on the flash drive though too. So, any questions so far? We've talked about like 2 things. How much was my bong?
How bad was your mom?
Oh, how pissed off was my mom about that computer? Well, at first not at all, because she didn't know. But then what happened was she took it to work and probably had a meeting, probably an important one. And during said meeting, the computer did not boot it. When it boots up, what it says is missing operating system. It doesn't go any further. Then I got a call at school, at my grade school. All right, so there we go, slides. You know what, we can even, you're not seeing this, are you? HDMI. All right, we're going to recover from this, people. The lesson here is resiliency. Cybersecurity and presentations, we need resiliency. If something goes wrong, we need to be able to recover. And gosh darn it, we're going to recover. Can I curse in here? Is it okay? I'm very tempted right now to curse. But I promise. All right, so this is what the Richard Simmons virus is going to look like. Well, my demo here is actually going to load up VCL, virus, virus creation laboratory. When you install it, you have to have a password because it's so secretive. The password, I'll give it to you, is Chiba City, which is a reference to Gibson. Once it's installed, you go and run it, and it gives you a beautiful little menu creation system. Like I said, you can decide what you want your virus to do. The VCL also comes with some example viruses that you can run. And one of them is the Richard Simmons virus. So there's a little VCL file that has all the settings for it. This thing kicks out assembly, it'll assemble it for you, gives you an executable that you can deliver to the unsuspecting kid who ruins his mom's laptop. So, does this thing have VLC on it by chance? I can check, I'm just curious. All right, so we're going to run the Richard Simmons virus as I magically type without using my fingers. So, richards.com. And you can see, come on now, let's trim that fat. 1, 2, 3. If you don't know, Richard Simmons was an exercise guru. And nothing happens. Now the computer's locked up, you can't type or whatever, and you can reboot, and it's just going to come up and say, missing operating system, which is very frustrating to your mom in a board meeting. There we go. So there is our demo. And our offering to the demo god was rejected. Much like I will be at the next kernel con. Okay, so here's our PDF slides, which are nearly as good as the real thing. Boy, this isn't an HP2, is it? Oh my goodness, yeah, this is our presentation mode. Is this IE? Okay. so you've seen much of this. Let's keep going. Okay, we left off right around form. Okay, so you download your VCL, you deliver your virus, whatever. That's how you get back to people. That's how you attack the people you shouldn't. If this worked right in the virtual machine, we would hope that you did not actually get infected by the Richard Simmons virus by being on the Wi-Fi. So this is the actual computer that got hit, and the actual idiot kid who ran it. So we're back to the 90s now, the era of clear cases. And I talked about bulletin board systems, but the internet's a thing now, and people want to get on the internet. How do you do it back in the 90s? Well, you're probably going to dial up. So you need, if you're going to be an ISP, you need a lot of lines, and you need to be a place that has a lot of lines. Where do you have a lot of lines? Yeah, that's a joke for the boomers. Anyway, where do you get a lot of lines? Well, bulletin board systems have a lot of lines. They've got all these phone lines set up for their bulletin board system already. They're natural dial-up ISPs, right? And why do people want to get on the internet? The same reason. They want to do the same stuff, right? So curiosity is going to drive what we're doing. And this is the part where I would do a demo of Trumpet WinSock in Windows 3.1, getting you online in web browser. Now, I can't do the actual demo without a lot of stuff that we won't have time for, but I can try playing the video. Let's see, Trumpet WinSock. Ooh, you have VLC? Thank you. All right, this is what it would have looked like. We start up Windows 3.1. Windows 3.1 doesn't have networking built in, so you got to use this thing called Trumpet WinSock. It does the dialing for you, and it does the TCP/IP action for you. So once we're dialed in with that, it has a little ping utility. You can get command line ping stuff, but Trumpet WinSock gives you a nice graphical one. This is just a test to make sure our DNS works and everything else. And it does. Beautiful. So here's Netscape. This is Netscape, I want to say 1.0. Now, most sites you can't get to anymore because they're all SSL. But there is a proxy you can use to get to, they call proto-web, to get to old-looking websites if you want to mess around with this stuff. And so that's what I'm going through here. I'm going to go to the 3dfx.com website. They used to make graphics cards. And this is what it looks like loading the web back in those days. This is going from the Netscape browser through Trumpet WinSock over a point-to-point connection, PPP connection, over a modem, in theory. And as you can see, it's exciting and takes a while. But anyway, this is what people were doing with a dial-up internet provider. Same stuff you do today, just much, much slower and slightly more aggravating. The net was so new and there were so few things to look at that there were actually magazines put out that would tell you how to get to vampire websites and stuff like that, that would have a listing of websites to go to. Yahoo originally didn't even necessarily need a search because it was just an index of sites. I'll just go to the category of education and find the 12 different schools that are online. Then things expanded. So you've got your web users, they want to use dial-up internet access. You've got your BBS users still hanging on clean to the BBSs. And you've got your BBS ISPs benefiting from both because they can sell to both. In the Omaha area, in 402, and you can go out to textfiles.com and see this, there's this beautiful listing out there. There were, over the years, over 200 bulletin board systems that people knew about in 402. And there's unlisted ones too, those underground ones, but there were tons of bulletin board systems over the years. Local companies, some of them even had one. HDR, an engineering firm locally, they had a bulletin board system in one of their buildings. I don't know if like the higher ups knew about it, but there was one there. The Omaha Public Library down at the main branch ran a bulletin board system. It was called, anyone remember? It was called OWL, the Online Wired Library. So it was a bulletin board system. They could put out notifications about the library, people could chat, that sort of thing. It was a minimal function, but it worked. I had to see this so you get to see it. The libraries, in addition to that bulletin board system, the library also had terminals, dumb terminals all over the place, these beautiful amper screen Weiss terminals that were tied into their card catalog system. So back in the old days, you had to actually wear bell-bottoms and go digging through a card catalog in order to find what book you wanted on a shelf. Well, thanks to computers and a system called Dialpack from a company called Unix, kids could go look them up from a dumb terminal online. And the neat thing about it was the Omaha Public Library, like a lot of library systems nationwide, offered this through dial-up too. So you could, from your house, which I thought was amazing at the time, I know this is boring now, but you could dial up from your house, see what books are at your library. If the book you want is not in your branch, you can actually put a hold on it and have it transferred to your branch. Insane. It's like Netflix for books. And the beautiful thing about these terminals too was it turns out, anyone ever escaped to a shell, like you're in the more command, less command, something like that, you do an exclamation point, bangs, people call it. You can do that on those terminals, it turns out. I found that out. And you could run commands from the library, if you're sneaky about it. So that was fun. It was a Unix system, behind the scenes, that's what the slides are. So how did like a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old kid or whatever learn how to use Unix systems? Well, usually by using other people's. ESU3 was one wonderful example. Anyone ever used ESU3, ESU3.state.ne.i, whatever. Anyway, long freaking domain name. But ESU3 stands for Educational Service Unit 3. They service schools in Omaha. I still don't know exactly what they do, but they had a Unix system you could dial up to back in the day with internet access. Metropolitan Community College. I know we have people here from Metropolitan Community College or associated with it. They had metro.mccneb.edu. Which was a beautiful system too. I'll talk about why in a second. And then Creighton had tons of different systems. They had lots of money, so they had lots of different systems. And where do you learn all this stuff? You learn it from using those systems, and you learn it, there's no YouTube back then, and you learn it from these underground Baltimore systems that have text files that'll tell you how. I was also lucky enough to learn some things from a Fortune 20 company that they didn't know, but, and I've got it redacted here so you can't tell which one, but there was a company. And my mom worked there. She was an administrative assistant to the CEO and president, two different ones, they're shown here. Really nice guys to meet. I don't know what it's like to work under them, but I was a kid anyway. But what they didn't know is they're out on their porch right here, whatever, taking a photo, and behind them is the beautiful CEO's office, and inside there was a beautiful PS2 running OS2, and this video conferencing thing, you could hit a button and talk to Tokyo, and there's a TV hidden in a table, and so nights and weekends, that was my computer system. And that's where I learned OS2, and I learned DOS on their laptops, and I learned a lot about PS2s and how to mess those up too. But two systems that really were formative for me, and I think for a lot of us here, if you're old enough, would have been ESU3 and the Metro machine, metro.mcc.ne.edu, whatever. They were beautiful because back in those days, the password files were not shadowed. The password file had a hash value that anybody can go see. So at least they're hashed, not plain text. But the hashes were kind of weak too. They're based on DES. This is old school crypt. If you go do a man crypt in your Linux, you can go see this. Or BSD, I don't want to assume. But these hashes are salted. They've got a 12-bit number that's represented as two characters here. And then they've got this hash. There's two important things that happened in 1987 I want to mention. One of them is that the film Harry and the Hendersons was released to great acclaim. And yeah, that joke didn't work. We won't use it next time. And the second was that the shadow password suite was created to let you split up your passwords. Everyone knows now your hashes live in Etsy Shadow, your user information is in Etsy Password. They're divorced now, which is good. Back in the day, they were still together. And so even though this is the 90s, these two machines hadn't gotten the treatment yet. They weren't split out. So if you have any account on that machine, you can go read the hashes and you can try to crack those hashes. That meant there were a lot of impersonations. I was working up to this. There were a lot of impersonations going on these Metro systems. And I logged into ESU3. I ran a finger command or whatever to see who's online. And there'd be 10 people there, and I'm sure 9 of them were people under other people's names, using other people's accounts. So it's tough being a sysadmin today. It was tough being a sysadmin back then. And the good thing is, these kids made it harder. So if you're a sysadmin in an academic institution, you've already got college kids or whatever messing with your stuff all the time, like at Metro, and we made it slightly harder. I made it harder in part by getting a paper route, because I got a paper route so that I could afford to make payments towards a 486, 33 megahertz, because I wanted to crack passwords and I needed something fast. This is where I would demo WordPerfect and crackerjack. We're going to see if the demo video gods still love us. Oh, we got to run this in VLC. Give me just a second. So DOSBox makes these really weird AVIs that nobody but VLC can play. Okay, so I'm going to show you the greatest word processor ever devised, WordPerfect 5.1. Now, I got into the Metro system and I was able to crack a hash for somebody who actually ran that system for the sysadmin. And I found when I got into their home directory, they had something like this, a little awareness memo that they were going to send out to employees. It was in WordPerfect, so I downloaded it. I have WordPerfect, and I made some changes. So they give you some tips like, you know, keep your passwords secret and don't share them and that sort of thing. But they wrote in WordPerfect for Unix. My WordPerfect for DOS can change those files, so I downloaded it and I made some stealthy little changes to it. Keep your account easily accessible. There are a lot of thou shalt nots that became thou shalts. I do remember specifically it said do not use password or guest or your username, and I changed it to say use one of these, just pick one. So anyway, I was trying to help keep persistence for kids my age back then. And so this demo is just me typing through and all that. But this is not the real document. I know the real document is lost to destroyed evidence. But in any case, that's what it used to look like. We're going to save some time by not finishing it. But I do want to show you crackerjack. So anyone use John the Ripper? Anyone hate the command line syntax? The weird way that they do arguments? Yeah, I'll show you why they do them that way. At least this is my guess. Because they're based a lot on how Jack the Ripper did it. Jack 1.4, I'm going to run it against a password file. It's one of these password files that has the hashes built right in. I'm going to use a dictionary file that I still use today since the 90s. I've been carrying it with me called unabridged.txt. It has an unabridged dictionary in it. And it looks just like what you'd expect. It looks kind of like John the Ripper. You hit a button, it gives you the status, and it's going to crack those hashes. Now, 40,000 cracks per second, that's what I'm doing on my Core i7 that's pretending to be a Super 486. But on my actual 486, I think it was closer to a few hundred or whatever. So this is the sort of thing you leave running while you're at school. And there we go, we cracked one. We cracked Woodshop was the password for the e-Goldstein account. So there you go. Pretty simple, just like we have today. Same kind of stuff. In fact, this I'm sure influenced it, which is why those arguments are a pain in the neck to use. That's just a regular user though. That's not weird. So that was my first brush with digital forensics too, because I realized a few days after I made edits to that Metro awareness document that I have a different printer than the sysadmin at Metro, and that means that when he opens up this document in his WordPerfect, it's going to pop up and say reformatting for your printer, which might have clued him in. But I never heard anything back on it. So anyway, this dork who thought he was cool did eventually get caught, not for that, but for something else. See, back in the 90s, what I was after, what we were all after, were shells. We were after shell access. And that's something that the kids of today's generation take for granted. That's just your command prompt, right? You just open up PowerShell, open up Bash or whatever, and you've got it on a fast computer with a high-speed internet connection. That wasn't so back in the day. Back in the day, we had to fight for our right to use a shell. And so what happened was the internet was super friggin' slow if you're on dial-up. However, if you can dial into a shell at one of these colleges or companies or someplace that has a T1 or some sort of fast internet connection, that's beautiful because now you can download all of your stuff on their computer, leave it running while you're gone, and then let it run overnight over your modem. So you can make a nice fast download and then do a slow one overnight. We also did something called war dialing. I think everyone's, how many of you are CISSPs? What a waste of money. But me too. But yeah, so they talk about war dialing in there for some reason. But everyone here's done war driving, right? So you go around looking for some of you war bicycle, I know. But anyway, we used to do war dialing back in the day. And so that was another fun thing about ConAgra is they had a lot of phone lines. So if you wanted to do a lot at once, that was one way to do it. Plus, it comes back to them. Security, back in the 90s, back in the early mid-90s and back in the 80s and so on, was kind of like on Archer. It was baby town frolics. It was a lot of guess to get into systems. It was not too difficult. And I ran into a little bit of trouble because I went a step further and did some stuff with credit card numbers. So kids don't do that because it turns out that's bad. This is where we get to the demo for tone loc, which is a war dialer and a credit card generator. I don't think I can actually give you the tone loc one, so I'm going to give you the credit card generator one. I feel really bad about the tone loc one too, because it turns out DOSBox, if you haven't used it, they can do this modem emulator that lets you connect out. It pretends to be a modem, accepts haze commands, but it'll connect to IP addresses, and all these little DOS utilities work with it. So you can feed an IP address into a war dialer, and it'll actually war dial like nmap for you. Kind of fun. Not as efficient. So this is an example. This is Credit Master version 4. It's something you download from one of those underground bulletin board systems. This will generate credit card numbers. So if you didn't know this, credit card numbers, they have a CRC built into them. So you can, at a glance, or a computer can at a glance, figure out whether a number that you're given is valid or not, or could be valid. So this thing, you run it, it gives you all the current bank numbers, the bins, the first part of that credit card number. You pick the one that you want, tell how many digits you need to generate, because there used to be shorter ones, and bam, you've got credit cards you can use. And there was a local provider here, an internet provider, that let you create a new account, and whenever you created a new account, you could put in a credit card number, and you'd be good for a couple of days until they caught you. And so they'd take a fake credit card number, because things weren't instant back then. You weren't running the credit card, and somebody was manually doing that behind the scenes. Which led to a cease and desist order. Thankfully, it's in my dad's name. My dad, his name was on the phone line, so he got a cease and desist order and a call from the police. The downside is, I guess they found out real quick it wasn't him because he can't touch time. He still can't touch time. So my dad's not the suspect they're looking for, so they moved on to me, which led to a confrontational meeting with a lieutenant in a local police force here, not OPD, but nearby one. And this lieutenant was not happy. He was not happy, and he told me, you know, this thing you're doing, allegedly, credit card fraud. He asked, do you know who enforces that? Who enforces credit card fraud? Who goes after the credit card fraudsters? Do we know? Well, one of the big ones is the U.S. Secret Service. They look like this. The U.S. Secret Service goes after credit cards for some reason, because protecting dignitaries isn't time-consuming enough. And he told me these Secret Service special agents, when they come to your house, they just come in guns blazing, and they start shooting left and right. And, you know, they might hit you, you might shoot your mom, they might shoot your sister. Like, your whole family's dead thanks to you. What do you think of that? Even at like 10 years old, or 12 or whatever, I thought this was bullshit. Like I wasn't 100% sure, but I thought, don't they get some sort of training, or do they practice? The good news is that that wasn't the only talk I got, because that was a bad talk. The guy told me basically, you're a hacker, you're going to hell, you're going to get your family killed. But I had a second talk that was much friendlier, with the company that I was actually allegedly defrauding, which meant even though it was friendlier, there was an inherent, I guess there was an underlying risk of physical assault. But that didn't happen. I met with representatives from the local company. It's out of business now, but it was called Unix back then. Greater Omaha Public Access Unix. And these two fellows, Mr. Jack Winslade and Mr. Riddle Esquire was the attorney, the two of them talked to me, and they told me something different. They blew my mind because they said, you can be a good hacker, you can use your skills for good, you don't have to break the law. And I thought that was kind of amazing, because I'd just been told that I was, again, going to go to hell and get my family killed. They said, no, you can do this the right way. That didn't help with my parents very much, because I still got like a Dave Murphy style ban. I had a 2-year ban from computer and modem, which I broke within a week. It was really tough taking the computer apart and hiding the pieces all over the house, but anyway, I was banned for a little while, but I worked around it. And I did, like I said before, cop all this stuff when I got hired where I work. This is better in full screen, because the joke is that it wasn't a sergeant, it was actually a corporal that asked me the question. But anyway, don't worry about that. Law enforcement humor. I did a talk at DC-27 at the SkyTalks 303 village there, and I talked about this incident more in depth. And before that, I did some research and actually reached out to Mr. Jack Winslade, who may be here. Are you here? Okay. You were afraid to raise your hand, or not, I should say afraid. You were reluctant to raise your hand in Vegas, and I don't know if you're here, but you could be here. And if you are, thank you again. But Mr. Winslade responded to emails I sent. I asked him if he remembered this incident. And so I've got like 5 slides here of just his responses. And basically, they had all the evidence they needed to convict me. I was an idiot. I didn't know how phone traces work. We talked to the police, thought this is a good case. Let's nail this kid. They may not have known as a kid at first. Then they sent me over to talk to that detective lieutenant. Lieutenant said they had come to Jesus meeting with. That is a very friendly term for what that was. Prosecutor said, you know what, criminal charges on this? Nah, he's like 12 or whatever. But you could go for a civil action and go get some money out of him, or more likely my parents. The words that the detective said were, this kid's okay, doesn't need to go through the system. So my question was always, why the hell couldn't he have said that to me? Might have made a difference. Said it wouldn't be worth going after charges. And it turns out that the amount of money they lost was kind of small because it was just, using their internet connection and stuff like that. So nobody's ever done a lot of work for like 75 cents in a discrepancy or anything like that. Cuckoo's egg joke. So anyway, but Mr. Winsley did say that they wanted to push back these small ISPs against the Carters, and it must have worked. And he's right, it worked, because I was scared shitless of ever doing anything remotely like carding again, and I didn't realize until just a few years ago how close I came to federal prosecution, which would have been bad. But the thing that stuck with me was the good hacker talk. If I'd only had that first talk, that would have derailed what I was doing. That second talk really saved me. And that's what we need. That's what kids who get into trouble need. They need to get the treatment of Carl on Sneakers or Kingpin from Loft. They need to get that treatment that gets them into using a positive outlet for their skills and curiosity, that sort of thing. That's the talk that they need to get. And so, continuing with hacking and computers and all the nerd stuff that I did led me to the career that I have today. I wouldn't have had that. I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd probably still be at Best Buy. And it led me to a case that I'll call it's a career case. So in law enforcement, you work career case. It's like it's something you do like once, maybe twice in your career. It's a kind of a big deal. It was a big deal for me anyway. We had a homicide case, cold case, back in 2012 that started. We went to trial in 2017. This is the killer. I've disguised her face. I'm not going to mention her name because she doesn't deserve any notoriety, and I hope she's forgotten. But I will mention the victim. The victim is Carrie Farber. She was a 39-year-old single mother from Potawatomi County, from Macedonia, Iowa, where I'm from. And she disappeared in 2012, and it took us 5 years to get to court. And her body has never recovered, so her family didn't get that kind of closure and stuff like that. The reason I bring this up, doesn't sound like hacking, right? Is that there is a clear line for me from the crimes that I allegedly committed, the good hacker talk that let me keep going on this stuff, the work that I did after that to try to actually learn stuff, to DEF CON, because I actually got into IT work. I went to DEF CON 14 or 15, I can't remember which one, but there was a talk there called Hack Your Job. It was about, the whole idea was basically you might already be in your dream job, you might just need to tweak it. And so I took that to heart. I got into digital forensics that way. I was able to start out as a volunteer. I spent 8 years volunteering doing digital forensics before I got a full-time job doing it. And I was in the right place at the right time, because I work at a very small law enforcement agency. We have 61 people or whatever like that. We have nobody to do digital forensics before I started doing this. We can go to the state, but the state has their own cases, their own priorities. This thing that case took about 3 years to work. And I was just in the right place to work. I don't have any special skills. I'm not, amazingly talented. Anybody in this room could have done the same thing I did in that case, just put the time in. But I was in the right place to do it because of that good hacker talk. So I think that helped out. We brought closure to the family because we were able to get that conviction and help give them an end to that story, because they had 5 years of uncertainty. And by the way, that killer pretended to be their family member for 3 years online, and even reached out to me. Cold-hearted stuff. That's my angry portion of the talk. Let's get to the happier part. So, law enforcement, if you work in law enforcement, you get asked to talk to kids a lot, you get asked to talk to student groups, so every time I do, I give them the good hacker talk. They get the message, hacking is a good thing, use your skills for good. I show them slides with pictures of people that aren't necessarily wearing hoodies in basements. That hackers can look like you too. You can be a hacker. So, and kids dig this stuff. They're super excited about it. They're sponges, they want to learn. So, as long as we don't turn them off from it, they will. This is where you'll be hearing the beeper sound, which is A, a reminder of the 90s, and B, a reminder of me to hurry the frick up because we have to get it over. How am I on time?
12.
All right. 7 minutes?
12.
Oh, thank That's not enough. All right, so how do you get root at your ISP back in the 90s? Is it going to be tough to do? Have we already kind of spoiled the ending? Guess what the root password is? If you read the agenda. So security back in the 90s, like security always, it's a house of cards. And it's when there's a big failure or somebody gets into something, it's seldom because of one thing that goes wrong, you know, or one hole. It's because of a chain reaction, a bunch of cascading failures. And it was the same back then, so it's cascading failures. So I'm going to talk about my first real internet provider that I paid for, that I wasn't stealing, allegedly. My first internet provider was a bulletin board system that became an ISP, and they were actually doing both back when this happened. I'm not going to name the people that ran it. There were two people that ran it. I'm going to pretend their names are George and Elaine. This is a 90s reference for you millennials. But George and Elaine ran this company. They're partners. I'm going to call their company Vandelay Industries. And so let's say that their domain name is van.isp. So they run this ISP. They were originally a bulletin board. They turned it into both. And I was reading email or a Usenet post one day, and I noticed in the headers that George sent a message, and it said it came from a computer with his name. It was george.van.isp. Well, that's kind of neat. And mostly I just wondered, how the heck do I get one of those? I want to be tony.van.isp. So I did one ping only, and went to go see if that machine was up. And sure enough, it resolves, and I can ping that machine. It's on the network when I'm dialed into this provider. So I started knocking on the door a little bit. I didn't have Nmap back then. This is the 90s, remember? We got DOS and Windows 3.1 and stuff. So I tried services that I had clients for. I tried Finger, doesn't respond. I tried Telnet, doesn't respond. I tried FTP, and we're in. Responded to FTP. Now here is a really crude drawing of their network based on my understanding of it. So basically, there's me, the nerd. You dial in, they have a network with the bulletin board servers, the Unix server that does all their email and DNS and stuff like that. You've got this dude's Windows 3.1 PC that answers an FTP, and you've got a NetWare file server where they keep all the files for the BBS and other stuff. This is where we pray to no, you know what, screw you gods. All right. Not the ones you guys like, but just the demo one. So we would be doing a demo where I show you how to do this. Thankfully, I do have a video, so I'm going to show you that. But basically, I'm going to show you, I didn't have Ethereal or Wireshark or whatever, I didn't have protocol analyzer back then to use. But it turns out Trumpet Windsock, the thing we use to dial in and get TCP IP, has a debug trace you can turn on, and it works kind of like a packet snippet. So glad I recorded these videos. So I'm going to get Windows 3.1. Pretend this is the 90s. Everybody listen to Nirvana. Dial into my PVP connection, so I get dialed up to this provider, this ISP, and now it turns out I'm an insider threat because I'm on their LAN because I dialed in. Turns out George runs this terminal called NetTerm. He uses it for Telnet. It includes a free FTP server. And by default, Anonymous gets straight to the C drive and has access to everything on your C drive. So I'm going to connect to it. Here I am connected with WSFTP and FTP client, and I can scroll through and I can find his FTP client. And I found his FTP client, which has, there's no registry yet, an INI file. Download the INI file. Why do I want the INI file? Exactly, saved credentials. He's got a saved password in there. It's encoded with this weird kind of reversible encryption. I don't know how to decode this. But thanks to Trumpet Windsock, I don't need to know how to decode it. Thanks to a pirated copy of Trumpet Windsock. Anyway, I can turn on tracing for TCP connections. And if I say show me extra info, it's going to give me the packet trace. So here we go. I'm going to connect to George's machine. Sent the password. Login failed here for my example, but don't worry about that, because what's important is when I go back into Trumpet Windsock, you can see the discussion, you can see the user, and you can see the pass. And now I have the password in plain text. That password it turns out, works on a Unix box that he was FTPing to. So now I have a login to that Unix box that runs stuff for the ISP. And guess who doesn't have password shadowing? No password shadowing means, for our final demo, we can throw that password file in, against Crackerjack, and we'll try to see if we can figure out what the root password is. If only I typed it quicker. So I'm going to throw my unabridged dictionary at it again. I still have that to this day. I've got like a little, like half dozen files that came from Cypherpunk's FTPs and stuff back in the 90s. Anyway, let it go, and when it cracks the root password, they're actually jerks because they say, "Here's a jackass." Specific message program to come up when you crack a root password. So now we've got the root password. The root password is klondike. I didn't even know that was an ice cream thing. I just learned that today. So here's your chain. This is how that worked. Hostname was in the headers. FTP was left on. Probably turned it on just to do some file transfers and forgot to turn it off, something like that. That led to the stored credentials for the FTP client. Led to a Unix login. Shell history on that Unix login actually had credentials for the NetWare file server. So you get into the file server. Ansi password, you can crack root. Full access on this ISP, completely owned. And NetWare file server was interesting. One of the first things I did for persistence is, and I thought I was cool and under the radar, but this was dumb, I created an account called A at band.isp and I started using this as an email address in the login. I got caught. They found me. So that was a problem. But I didn't hear anything. I never got in trouble for this. To this day, I've not gotten in trouble for this. I have an idea why, though. I have an idea. So this Baltimore system, this ISP, they had a whole bunch of shareware out there. They had like 2.1 gigs at one point, which was a lot when you had megabyte hard drives, if you had a hard drive at all. They had all this shareware on their file server for the Baltimore system. Turns out they had even more pirated software. They had a treasure chest, a trove, a Scrooge McDuckian amount of really cool pirated stuff that I stole. There's Adobe stuff, Microsoft, you name it. And so I think that they had a little dilemma. They had to decide, do they go after me and risk that I say something about what I found? And so they didn't. And what happened instead was I got locked out of this. They changed the root password. They kicked me out of a whole bunch of other stuff. But they didn't kick me off the Baltimore system. They just gave me access to the underground part of it, the pirated part. And I never heard anything else from it again. But I stopped pirating. I stopped pirating. Eventually. Once I got a real job and I could actually afford music and stuff like that. And so that led me to my career in law enforcement. And so now I am a hacker and I carry a badge. There are literally dozens of us. Which brings me to questions. On time, despite the problems.
How did you determine you wanted to go into law enforcement?
How did I determine I wanted to go into law enforcement? Accidentally. No, but I was really interested in security after seeing other people's security back when I was a kid. And so I kind of got into IT, then I moved into security stuff, and then when I was doing that, our sheriff's office didn't have anyone who did it. And so I said, hey, I can help out with this case. And then I moved into more and more of that, and now that's what I do all the time. So yeah, kind of naturally. I tweaked my job, I hacked my job basically because of that DEF CON talk.
Did you have to have a DOS level packet driver underneath it from it?
No, you did not have. Did you have to have a DOS packet driver underneath? No, you didn't have to do any of that fossil nonsense. Trumpet can do all that stuff for you. If you want to do it from DOS, you can. But I did not have to. And by the way, this all works amazing in DOS box. Any other questions? Personal questions are fine. I have no shame.
Can you be a part of it without carrying a badge or a gun?
Could you be a part of law enforcement without carrying a badge and gun? Absolutely. So there are kind of two schools of thought there, or two or three, or there's a lot of schools. So it's, do you make a cop a hacker, or do you make a hacker a cop? And it can work both ways, but there are a lot of civilian digital forensic examiners and cybercrime investigators out there. I'm weird because actually my day job is a civilian position, but I'm a reserve deputy, a special deputy in the sheriff's office, and so I am sworn, but my day job is a civilian position. So I could, if I really screwed up and lost my badge, I can still do my day job if they still employed me. But having both helps because it means I can go swear out a search warrant, I can serve search warrants, I can go from start to finish with it. I can bring charges and everything else versus if I didn't have that, I'd have to hand it off to a sworn person at some point. You've been an amazing audience. Thank you for putting up with that screw up there. If you do talks like this, do have the PDFs and AVIs with you. So glad I used that flash drive.
Are you going to stick with HP?
Am I going to stick with HP? Yes, I had an Elite book before this. 5 years, not a single problem. I loved it. I got this new one. It's smaller, cooler, and I think I plugged it into 240 once, and it says it can do that, but it's never been the same. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate you coming. If you want to reach out, there's contact info for you.